Carl Allen has reported for duty.
And not at all, General.
We're having a little get-together at my place.
We are Sparta!
Yeah, no.
No.
You're always making excuses. When's the last time you did anything fun? Carl, long time no see.
You must be running this place by now. I could have. Didn't want to get tied there.
I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I've lived. Yes, man.
Wow.
Yes.
No.
You say no to life, and therefore you're not living. Every time an opportunity presents itself, you will say yes.
You do want to take guitar lessons?
Would you be the man for me?
I guess so. Yes, I would like to learn Korean.
Tongue.
If you've seen that movie, it's a great movie. And every musician's journey will be different. But one thing that is true of all of our experiences is that none of us were born with experience. All of us had to say yes to an opportunity that we were not yet experienced in to continue developing our professional profiles. There, however, has to be a skill set that has been cultivated to be able to say yes. This lecture and panel discussion will explore these foundational skills which are necessary for a successful career in the music industry. Some teaching, some writing and producing, and some performing. The music industry is a truly multidisciplinary industry. In my journey, I've taught private lessons, master classes, clinics, lectures, academic classes, workshops, group lessons, and etc. As a composer and producer, I've written and produced arrangements and compositions for documentary films, church services, recording projects, and etc. My arrangements and compositions have been in a variety of styles and have been for a variety of instrumental and vocal combinations, including jazz combo, jazz big band orchestra, concert band, marching band, gospel choir, contemporary dance, liturgical dance, contemporary Christian church band, string quartet, woodwind quintet, hip-hop band, and etc. And I have performed around the world as a featured artist, but also as a sideman. I've done musicals and performed with orchestras, concert bands, jazz big bands, jazz combos, contemporary Christian bands, and etc. I've also done quite a bit of recording and producing, which has made me have to develop a mastery of computer-based recording. I'm also a multi-instrumentalist. Saxophone, flute, and clarinet are my primary instruments, but I also play electric bass, guitar, and piano, which is especially useful for my writing and arranging. And I'm not sure how it's possible to stay bored with all the possibilities that music offers. Skills are necessary to do anything, and music is no exception. The most important thing to understand here is that each musician may have a different combination of teaching, writing, and performing, but a mastery of all three is necessary. You don't know where the next opportunity will come from, or from whom. Cast your net wide, but be competent at everything that you do. Let's talk a little bit about setting goals. Dream goals. Long-term goals. Intermediate goals. And short-term goals. Setting goals is a great way to map out your career path. I always have my students start with their dream goals and work backwards down to their short-term goals. This is important because if you don't know where you're going, then setting short-term goals won't lead you anywhere. This list of goals should be regularly revised. For instance, at one time, my dream goal was to become a tenured professor at a major university. Now that I am a tenured professor, my goals have to change, or my trajectory will stagnate. I also find it to be true that whenever I have reached a goal that took a significant amount of work to achieve, it's important for me to find a mentor that can help me to put things into context. Yeah, it's time to talk about discipline. It's still funny to me that people still think that there are actually people that are born disciplined. Discipline is hard work, but it's worth it. I discovered early in my life that if I didn't get disciplined, that I wasn't going to be able to reach my goals. My goals were too important to me for me to stay lazy. So over a period of time, and I'm still working on this, believe me, I developed a system to help me stay more disciplined. And I'm sure that I'll never truly perfect it, but I know that I wouldn't be where I am today without having become more disciplined. Part of this discipline thing is about, as this next slide says, doing things now and not later. It's about not procrastinating. It's about not procrastinating. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about organization. In my life, structure has been the metaphorical motor that has kept me moving down the street. To say this another way, without the structural integrity of the foundation of a house, nothing built can stand for long. What's the point of busting your butt for a lifetime without the means to sustain the rigor of a successful career in music? If you were to take a look at my schedule, and this really is this week, really is this week in my schedule. My schedule, you'd notice that it's color coded, and that during the day, especially during the school year, each hour is accounted for. Now, that may not be your approach, and that's okay. However, if I wasn't diligent to account for each hour and follow my schedule, then I wouldn't be able to do most of what I do. I like to plan things far in advance of when they are due so that I don't have to drop everything, neglecting practice time, family time, weight training time, and etc., to put out a fire that was preventable. Let's talk a little bit about what's called the tyranny of the urgent. The tyranny of the urgent. Now, see, what happens here is you have certain priorities. You have certain things that you've decided that are important. The longer that you go without catering to those things that are important, the more likely one of those things is going to become urgent. As soon as something becomes urgent, by definition, it means that you have to drop everything, including other important things, to cater to that thing that is urgent. This creates a cycle, and it's hard to break. Going back to one of the earlier slides, doing things now rather than later is a good way to help to prevent the tyranny of the urgent. Prevent yourself from falling into that. Perseverance. When I was in my junior year working on my undergraduate degree, I came very close to dropping out of school. Really close. Not only was I struggling academically, but I was having several social and political challenges with many things that were happening around me. And all I wanted to do was play music. Sound familiar? Anybody is supposed to play music, right? I didn't want to have to deal with issues and classes that didn't have anything to do with my career as a performing musician. I finally came to myself and pushed through the obstacles and ignored issues that were not related to my pursuance of a degree in music. I could have made another decision, in which case you wouldn't even probably know who I am or even be listening to me right now. Decisions have consequences, but they can also have rewards. Pushing through the obstacles that faced me that junior year was a necessary step towards me becoming a tenured professor at Ohio State. Everything's connected. This is actually a picture of my sister-in-law. And She's one of my heroes. She decided that she was going to just be more fit. She lost a lot of weight and she got in shape, and now she's a marathon runner. And now she's on the cover of the Detroit Free Press. You know, talking about perseverance. I'll never forget a conversation that I had with someone that I used to know. One day I offered this individual the opportunity to go to the gym with me. I'm an amateur bodybuilder and have been lifting weights since I was in 8th grade. She looked at me and said, "You go to the gym because you like the gym. I don't like the gym, so I don't go to the gym." I stopped her right there and told her that she misunderstood. I don't like to sweat, struggle, or experience muscle soreness any more than anyone else. In fact, I hate the gym. But I also like the results. This is how I feel about my practicing. Practicing my instruments or writing a new composition or an arrangement. Most of the time, I don't feel inspired. Most of the time. Like 95% of the time. Most of the time, I'd rather watch TV or play video games. And I play video games. And I have an Xbox. But instead, because of the goals that I have set for myself, I realize that I must endure discomfort for a time so that I can achieve fulfillment in the long run. Practicing is not fun, but I have learned how to enjoy it. Excuses. All right. This is a good one. Dr. Ben Carson, that's who this is. Dr. Ben Carson, during a speech he gave at the National Prayer Breakfast on February 7th, talked about how his mother would not allow him to make excuses and how important that was in making him the man that he is today. Dr. Carson is director of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins University. He grew up in terrible poverty in a single-parent household, and despite tremendous odds, made himself a success. I'm tired of hearing the stories about reformed drug dealers making it big in the music industry, using drug money as the seed money for a recording project is not noteworthy. We've heard that story. What about people that did it right? What about people like my personal hero, my father, who, like Ben Carson, grew up in poverty but didn't let that define who he was going to be? And my father wouldn't let me make excuses either. I didn't realize how important that was until recently. Everything that I have is because I was taught at a young age not to make excuses. But it's never too late to decide not to make excuses anymore. Your life's trajectory is directly related to this important decision. Recently, I had the opportunity to thank my father for not allowing me to make excuses. After thanking me for acknowledging him for that, he said, "No one cares what your excuses are. They only care if you're successful or not." Balance. Burnout is no fun. And I've experienced 3 of them on my journey. Now, you may be thinking that I burned out because of a rigorous and regimented schedule, but actually, the opposite is true. Burnout is the result of neglecting some need that you have for a long period of time. My first burnout was caused by several things, converging. I had far too many gigs as a sideman where I was not part of the creative process. I was in a relationship with someone that didn't understand the lifestyle of a freelance musician, and I had erratic sleeping patterns. Unfortunately, I didn't learn from the first burnout, so the second burnout was far worse. After the second burnout, I made several adjustments, including becoming more organized, but not as many as I should have, so I experienced another burnout, but because I had made several adjustments, that burnout was far less severe. I'm happy to be able to say that I haven't experienced a burnout in several years. I had to find a balance in order to be able to continue my musical journey. That balance is primarily worked out in my daily schedule. Networking. I'm no expert on networking, but I know that it is a necessary evil. That's a joke. Networking is very important. I'm an introvert, and so it's hard for me to find the energy to go to gatherings where I don't know anyone. But I need to network so that people are aware of the skills that I've spent my life developing. A few things that you can do to effectively network is by having an internet presence. There are several social networking websites, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. You all are very aware of what those are. But one thing I don't think you're aware of is how powerful they can be as far as marketing what it is that you're trying to do. And, we're spending a lot of time updating our status on Facebook, but we don't spend as much time using that resource to actually to promote what it is that we're trying to do, the kinds of things that we want to be able to do in the future, to let people know of the skills that we've been developing over time. You also want to consider a website. Other ideas include going to concerts and supporting your fellow musicians. By going to concerts, you will put yourself around like-minded artists. Jam sessions are great too, for the same reason. If you want people to support you, then you have to support others. The secret to getting what you want is by giving someone else what they want. Finally, you need to know when to be willing to work for free. Yes, I said it. When to be willing to work for free. Sometimes the way to get in is by demonstrating what you can do pro bono. In fact, this is how I met my wife. I began showing up for rehearsals at a local church for a few months in succession. I was always on time and I was willing to play because the musical director saw my dedication and professionalism. Even when I was not being paid, the church created a position for me and retroactively paid for 1 month of time served. I worked there for a year and a half. It just so happens that Lori, my wife, also one of our panelists, was the director of the dance ministry. And so even, let me see here, I think I had a picture of her. Oh, there she is. She's the director of the dance ministry, and so even before we knew each other, we collaborated on an Easter service. My wife is far more social than I am, and that works in my favor. She sets up conversations so that I don't expend so much energy trying to break the ice in social situations. She encourages me to be more social, and I listen to her because she is far better at networking than I am. One of the most overlooked aspects of networking is just treating people the way that you want to be treated. Look, we all know a jerk musician that somehow works all the time and gets better opportunities, or that jerk administrator that seems to get promoted when they do a bad job and treat people poorly. But the fact is that those are exceptions. The best teachers, composers, producers, artists, and performers that I know are also good people. That doesn't mean that they are perfect, but it means that they are trying to treat people how they want to be treated. I don't know about you, but I don't like working with jerks. And when I have opportunities to hire other musicians, it's always the people that I not only respect for their artistry, but also for the kind of people that they're trying to become. Relationships. Look, all of us know or have known people that are always encouraging us to relax more than we should, or to get into situations that we should. Obviously, these individuals don't have our best interest at heart. We should minimize our contact with such individuals, but there is something else to be said in this context. You have to be careful who you share your dreams with, because insecurity can cause people to try to tear down your dreams. to make you feel like you're not being realistic, to make you feel like, who are you to try to do that? You know, insecurity is sort of an interesting human emotion. We're all insecure about something. I think that's important to know also. Even the people that you think have accomplished the most and are doing everything that you want to be doing, they have a list of things that they're insecure about. All of us are insecure about something. But we can choose not to allow that insecurity to spill out onto other people. Sometimes people think that they are acting in your best interest, but because they don't know any better, they will steer you in the wrong direction. And this commentary would be all for naught if I didn't mention how important it is to select a mate that is supportive and understanding about all the things that you have that you have to do to be successful. And what is success? You have to define that for yourself and for your spouse. And your spouse has to be on board with it, or you may be in for a rude awakening. It takes a special person to understand why you want to practice 5 hours a day for a gig that pays $50. A special person. Not many. There are not many of those. The continuum. All of us are on a journey, but some of us are farther along than others. It is our responsibility to help those that are open to being helped. And it is also our responsibility to be constantly seeking mentors who are willing to share with us what they have learned along the way. Charles Barkley infamously said, "I'm not a role model." Two things that I take away from this. Charles actually is a role model, but it's up to each person to determine who is worthy of being their role model. It's also possible and likely that a mentor will be a master of some things while being terrible at others. So you may need to seek out multiple mentors. And don't allow age to dissuade you from learning from others, because someone is younger than you shouldn't be the reason that you won't approach them to take advantage of what they have to offer. So why say yes? Yes opens you up to possibilities that doubting yourself cannot provide. You must have the raw materials necessary to be successful in order to say yes. This is what our educational system is all about. Going to school will not guarantee a successful career. However, if you let it, it'll give you the raw materials necessary to be able to say yes to opportunities. This is not just another stay in school message. This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for each of you to view school in a different way. As I said earlier, if I hadn't finished my undergraduate degree and then my master's degree, I wouldn't even be here talking to you now. It was my education plus goal setting. It was my education plus discipline. It was my education plus organization. It was my education plus perseverance. It was my education plus networking that allowed me to be able to say yes. Saying yes is not just some positive energy that mystically flows like the movie Yes Man. It's what facilitates encounters with people and opportunities. As the saying goes, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Thank you. Now I would like to give each of the panelists an opportunity to to say something about one of the topics, or maybe about something that's not one of the topics that they think is important or that needs to be said in this context. And we're going to try to keep those remarks limited so that we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions. Hopefully you guys have been putting some questions up. All right, Chris, you want to start? Oh, and I guess I should say who we have as our panelists. That'll be nice. On the end over here is Professor of Horn, Bruce Hennis. Start a hand for Bruce. Next to him is my wife, Lori Wallace. Now, Lori is the only non-musician on the panel. I thought that was important because many of the things that I was saying obviously are not music specific, but even larger than being artist for any kind of artist. I think they're just good basic principles to live by. But she has her own dance company called Tapestry Performing Arts. She's also an interior decorator, and she still is over the dance ministry at her church. She wears a lot of hats and does it well. Next to her is Jim Rupp, who teaches drums here. Another member of our jazz faculty, Tim Comiskey, a fine guitar player, world-class guitar player. This is my teacher. Most everybody on this panel are my teachers in some kind of way. But Tim has been giving me free guitar lessons for some time now, and it's much appreciated. This is a world-class, great guitarist. Next to him is another one of my teachers. And truth be told, I told a story about an unnamed church that I used to work at, and a musical director, minister of music that was Milton Murphy. And Milton is the principal at Fort Hays. He's also the minister of music at New Salem Missionary Baptist Church. Milton does everything and does it great. He's a great singer. He's a great writer. He's a great academic. He's a great
bass player.
Piano player. Yeah, he's a great piano player. I mean, he's acoustic and electric. I ask him questions anytime I get a chance to. Milton Rupp. I thought it was important to have a musicologist on our panel, and Dr. Ryan Skinner, professor of musicology. And then on the end is our trumpet teacher, also teaches arranging, composition, and is an awesome musician, composer, producer. He really fits the definition of a modern musician, like all the skills that you need to have together to make it in the modern music industry. Chris Johnson. So Chris, why don't you start?
All right. First of all, Sean, kudos to you, man. It's a great presentation, really necessary. For any of you, if this is going over anybody's head, or if there's any moments you guys kind of like, what are we talking about? What's going on? This is really important, and I really wish that I had something like this when I was an undergrad, especially, because I think it's really important to key in to these type of issues. Right now, we're kind of living in this musical bubble, and it's really awesome. There's a lot of great opportunities, but we have to understand that when you leave here, and this is something I didn't get coming out of undergrad, you have to find a way to make a living, and you have to find a way to turn all this training, all this wonderful, world-class training that you're getting, how to turn that into income, into a lifestyle, into one day having a family, into setting goals. All of these things are really important. So I think it's really important. If I were all of you, I would try to get a copy of the slideshow and really pay attention to everything that's going on, because it's really essential. What I would like to touch on, there were so many things covered. Specifically, what I'd like to say is that I think it's important to say yes, and I think it's important to pursue as many opportunities as possible. I also think it's very important that when you're setting these goals and when you're taking different opportunities, that you're very careful that the opportunities you're taking are things that you could see yourself doing in the long run. We all have to do things to make sure that we can pay the bills, to make sure we can do everything that we need to do. But at the same time, be careful on how you're spending your time. Because you can easily find yourself just filling up your time with things just to get by, or filling up your time with things just because you're saying yes because a friend's having you do something. But every second you have now is precious. And I didn't understand that when I was your age. I didn't really understand how important my time was. And I tried to be disciplined. I tried to do as many things as I could. But what was more important with that is all of a sudden I'm married, or all of a sudden I have a couple of jobs, all of a sudden I have kids, and I'm realizing how precious every second you have is. Now, I wouldn't trade my family or my kids for anything in the world, but it takes up the majority of my time. And it makes it really difficult to practice. It makes it really difficult to write. Yet I find myself having to do all of those things. So it's really important right now, when you have just a multitude of time available, that you really start thinking about these things and you really take advantage of, what am I doing here? What do I want to do with my life? And how does the time that I spend now, influence that? And then also one thing that Professor Wallace also touched on was talking about enjoyment and the balance between enjoyment and discipline. I think it's important to, yes, kind of just accept that there are going to be some things that aren't going to be that fun that you have to do. But I think it's really, really important to understand that as musicians, unless we're going to be one of the chosen few who becomes a famous film score, or one of the chosen few who lands like, Wynton Marsalis's job, or is in a symphony that pays six figures. I mean, those are the chosen few that get that. We're talking about doing something that doesn't always guarantee a paycheck every month. We're talking about doing something that doesn't always guarantee that we're going to be, even anywhere close to being rich. I think it's really important that as you're taking these opportunities, that you're making sure that you're pursuing happiness in the middle of that, and you're finding the joy within your musical creation while finding a balance of how to create a living for yourself. I know we're supposed to be short. Is that short? Okay. But yeah, I think it's really important that you start thinking about, where do I want to be in life, and how do I find the balance between the joy that life can bring through all this music and art that I'm creating, and making sure that I'm setting myself up to not live in poverty. I mean, it's really important, and really a reality that everybody needs to think about.
I'd like to also thank Professor Wallace for this very productive forum. I have 2 points to make, and I'm basically just going to give you two headings, two ideas. I'm not going to go into great detail to think about. In addition to what Sean Wallace was talking about, and another to sort of deepen or add a little personal story to deepen some of his points. The first is public advocacy, and the second has to do with being susceptible to serendipity. By public advocacy, I mean this. We're a generation of, before me here, a generation of musicians and of citizens who are growing up in an era of austerity. And I think it's vitally important that we learn to be public advocates for what we do. To create a space in society at large in which the arts are perceived to be vital and integral and essential to the public good, and as a part of our broader social contract. And so my work deals with the politics of culture, and I'm asking you to consider what that might mean, what a musical civics might mean, what it might mean to be actively engaged in creating spaces publicly for the arts in our society. I think that's something that can very easily be lost sight of in this day. The second has to do with just this issue of serendipity and being susceptible to it. Really what I want to say here is make yourself open to new experiences. I'm an ethnomusicologist. I think my career in some ways is the product of that ethic. When I had a meeting 15 years ago with one of my professors, and it was going on 15 or 16, and I was talking about doing an abroad study program, and I thought, well, I want to learn French, so I should probably go to France. And he said, no, well, you could do that. France is going to be an easy place for you to go to in the future, but why don't you think about Africa? In fact, why don't you think about my home country, Mali? There's this program through the School of International Training. They can take you there. You can stay for 4 months. And I said, okay, Mali. Well, they speak French there. I learned about that at that meeting that day. They speak this other language, Bambara. 15 years later, I'm a fluent speaker of French and Bambara. I play the kora. I'm a professor of ethnomusicology at The Ohio State University. I wouldn't be sitting here today telling you about this serendipitous experience that opened up a horizon that would become my career, if not for that moment. So being open, being susceptible, making yourself susceptible to those kinds of experiences, I think, is something that can be quite risky, and obviously there is risk for failure or outcomes that weren't ideal, but this is how things happen.
Okay. Again, thank you, Sean Wallace, for this opportunity. I think it's a great idea to be talking about. Is that Prezi?
Prezi, yes.
Prezi.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Prezi? Are you? Yeah. You familiar with PowerPoint? Okay. Prezi is that it's not linear like PowerPoint. It has all of this really cool visual, and it's created on a circle. So that's why that presentation looks so nice. The reason I'm saying that, I'm going to come from the perspective of an educator, but I'm a musician that's an educator. And 2 points that I was going to make. One would be every experience that I have had in my life creates these circles. Every experience I had at Ohio State created these circles. And so my entire life has been a series of circles. And what's important about that series of circles is what's called the locus of inference, the point by which those circles intersect. And that has been the story of my life, because every experience that I've had is starting to intersect. Every one of them. The time I was studying with Dr. McDaniel as a jazz major, and going to contests and getting awards, and from Louis Bellson and Clark Terry, and all of that is intersecting now. Back at Youngstown State, I thought I saw Jim Masters over there. With Tony Leonardi, those are intersecting. Being an undergraduate in here, working with the gospel choir as a volunteer, now is intersecting with what I do here at Ohio State, not as a volunteer. The church that I belong to and my upbringing, all of those circles are intersecting, which means that the more circles you have, the more experiences you have, the more chances you have for them all to start intersecting. And then before you know it, your life becomes this whole set of experiences that are attached to so many different things. The time that I played with Jim Rupp for years, with Bobby Pierce at Stofers in Dublin for years, all of that's intersecting. So saying that, becoming an educator, my experiences have now become the sum total of what I do as an educator. Not only as a teacher, as a music teacher first, and then as an administrator or a person that makes policy, and that can enforce policy, and that can delete policy. So I can hire music teachers, and I can fire music teachers. But because I'm at an art school, I hire music teachers. We're building the arts. We're building, and we're the advocacy position that he was talking about. That's what we're doing. And we're doing that on a really big scale here in Columbus. So it becomes this, again, a combination of all of these circles. And the last thing I'm going to say is that as a student, or as a person who loves art and who wants to continue to grow, for me, the one thing that I would say to you would be enjoy achieving more than enjoying achievements. Understand what I mean by that? Because I'm like that. I mean, I just love to achieve. That's why I'm in school for so long, and I'm just always trying to learn. You know, I hear something, I hear Sean play something on bass, and I'm saying, oh man. So I turn that YouTube video on, and I'm sitting there and I'm just trying to, because I want to achieve it. And I just enjoy achieving more than achievements. And that kind of keeps you a lifelong learner.
I don't want to cut anybody short, but I do want to have at least a couple minutes for students to possibly ask questions. So we can Go ahead.
Thanks, Sean. I've learned a lot from you as well over the years. So that's an example of, as much as I hate to admit it, example of somebody that's younger than you can have great influence and you can learn from them. Don't let those kind of fabricated mindsets stop you from learning. I was one of those undergrads that I kind of had the mindset, I didn't know it at the time really now, just looking back, and so I wanted to get my undergrad, and it was like pulling teeth, and had I not come from the family that I did, I had five older brothers and sisters that all had advanced degrees, it wouldn't have happened. I just, if I didn't have the parents and the upbringing that I had, so I'm thankful for that. I really thought that like you got your undergraduate degree and then you moved on and everything that Chris was talking about kind of happened in a systematic fashion. But the main thing that needed to change there is me realizing that this artistic and musical thing and becoming a great jazz musician or a great musician is it's a lifelong pursuit. It's like a calling, a vocation, if you wanted to say. If you think about like, if any of you are familiar with spiritual traditions in the world, it's like a prophetic calling that you have to really internalize despite any outward circumstances, if that makes sense. So that was something that really needed to change for me. And so I'm finishing up my undergrad and teaching assistantship at Bowling Green State University opened up, and that was the last thing on my mind. And so I had to have one of my teachers say, well, what are you going to do, work at Subway? That kind of underlined things. I mean, I was playing in some bands, but I didn't want to go to school anymore. That was the last thing. I mean, it was, when you graduate, you'll know it's a great feeling. You wake up that next month and you're done with school. It's a wonderful thing. You wake up and it kind of keeps hitting you. So, but I did the assistantship on his recommendation, and out of all the great teachers that I've studied with, I ended up getting a free master's degree and the opportunity to learn how to teach from what I would say is the best, no disrespect to my other teachers, the best teacher I ever had. And we're great friends to this day. And if situations come up, I need to call somebody in a musical or a political or some type of situation, I'll call him up. And I can trust what he's going to tell me. And another thing that happened in grad school is that I discovered that I really love writing in the literary form. I had to write a thesis for it. That was another thing that was the last thing on my mind. But I did it, and I got it done in time, and I really enjoyed it. I really did. And then I kind of parlayed that into several series of articles and getting published in magazines that I'm getting published to this day, several years later. A couple of books I've gotten published. I'm writing some in the non-musical realm now, and seeking publication with that. None of that would have ever happened had I not been forced to work in a serious academic context like that. So these are all surprises, and I'd like to say that I've gone through the process that Sean was talking to, but I had a couple of people kick me in to really underline that I needed to step into these, and I did. So now I'm taking the easier route a little bit more. And just also real quick, when I moved back here, I'm from Columbus. When I moved back here after grad school and some other things, there were a bunch of musicians in town that when I was younger, I would go see when I was in high school. And there were Jim Rupp's one of them, Milton's one of them, and Jim Masters. These guys were like gods to me. And I just started calling them on gigs. And that's how I did my networking. And they all said yes. So I ended up recording with Hank Marr, with Jim Rupp. It's a fine recording. It's Hank's last recording. So you got to step out. So with that, I'll pass.
Two quick thoughts. I asked, and for those of you, my students who auditioned for me, I asked you as a high school senior to come in for an audition. What do you want to be doing 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What's it going to take to get there? Are you willing to do what it's going to take to get there? At the NAMM show in January, and Russ Miller, who he and J.R. Robinson probably do most of the pop recording in LA, all the big records these two guys do. And Russ is from Ohio, and he's a longtime friend, and we're actually listening to Peter Erskine's trio, just a little reception. And I never knew this story. Russ said when he first moved to LA, he had $2,000, and I said, so that lasted you about 2 weeks, huh, Russ? And what he did, talk about what it's going to take to get there, he wanted to be a top studio musician in LA. He rents a used storage bin, puts a cot in there, puts his drums in there, joins Gold's Gym so he can go work out and get a shower. And I forget how many months he told me he lived in there. But now this guy, he's got a home on the beach, he's driving a sports car, he's doing great. He knew where he wanted to go, and he was willing to do what it took to get there. But you got to have goals, and those goals are going to change. Second thought is your entire professional life, and this applies whether you're a musician or you're a doctor or you're an accountant, really comes down to three things: your product, your marketing, and your business skills. In our case, as musicians, it's, can we go in and nail the gig? Can you play? Marketing is probably where musicians are historically most awful. You got to get out there. Part of that is networking. Part of that is, Facebook, whatever you have to do. It doesn't matter, again, whether you're a doctor or whatever. You've got to market yourself. You've got to be creative. You've got to be an entrepreneur. You've got to have people skills, especially in this biz. The drum set studio, we were in Mark's studio one day. Remember this, Mark? And we're playing through things, and one of the guys said, Mark, when you hire a guy to be a studio drummer, what are you looking for? Number one thing was not how well do you play, is are you a nice guy? You come into the studio and start with an attitude or a vibe, and then it kills it. It's like this bubble that's going. So part of your marketing is your personal skills. And then it's taking care of business. Do you show up on time? Do you return phone calls? I tell the story of a young drummer I taught who was a CAP student years ago. Really talented young player. I send him on a gig. He shows up barely in time. Supposed to be a tux. Well, it was kind of a tux. Next day I'm talking to Stan Smith, whose subby was for me. He said, hey Stan, how was so-and-so? Yeah, I won't hire him again. I think he's in Florida selling insurance now. So, next.
Thank you, Professor Wallace. And I know that in the essence of time, if you notice, all the musicians always have 2 points. Do you know that? They always have 2 points. So therefore, I'll just keep with the trend and I'll just make 2 points. The first point is, please don't look at that list and think that it is insurmountable, because no one has all of everything on that list under control. Everyone that is at this table is still consistently working. We are all a work in progress, so we're still consistently working on one of those points. The second point is networking and relationships really go together. So as they have also said, as much as you can, try to connect with people, not just in your field, not just in your instrument of choice, but across the board. So go to the recitals. Even if you don't know the person, go to the recitals, because they teach you different things. They teach you things that you would like to do, but they also teach you things that you would not like to do and how you can do things better. So I'll just stop there. It's in essence.
All right, I guess my 2 points will be, one of my teachers said that the best teacher any of us have is the school of experience. And everybody at this table has lots of vast experience that they can share with all of you as students. So I very much appreciate Professor Wallace putting this together, and I think the power of yes is a great thing. I also think that, and this is something that might be for a little later down the road, the wisdom of no sometimes. Being able to be selective about how much you take on. Because if you become too spread out, you're not going to develop your craft to the full extent. So the wisdom of being able to say no to some things and saying yes to the really important things. I was watching the NCAA tournament yesterday when the Buckeyes beat Wisconsin, and one of the commentators said, talking about a basketball team, that said, freedom comes from having great discipline. And I think that's very important for us to all look at that. And one discipline thing that I'd like to leave you with is our attitude is a discipline. And if you will develop and cultivate the most positive attitude, always looking for the best in somebody else, always looking for the best in whatever situation you encounter, I promise you it's going to come back to you tenfold. There can be a lot of negativity in any sphere of life. Don't let yourself get pulled into that. Okay.
Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much. Let's give it I didn't get any questions on the back channel. If somebody has a quick question, maybe we can answer that. Does anybody have a question at all? Go ahead.
You talked about being able to say yes to any game. So I guess I would like to hear more about like what you think would be necessary, like the groups of skills are in order to say yes to any game.
Are you asking about what the fundamental music skills you need to have as a musician, like musicianship? Well, I mean, a lot of those skills, it's like I was saying, if you're paying attention in school, that's part of the reason for going to school, is that it hopefully develops some of those skills. One thing that was touched on a little bit, and if you go to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Sean Thunder Wallace, all one word, I've got a couple full-length lectures on there. One of them is called Professionalism for the Working Musician. And so I think professionalism is one of those things that you can actually learn in school, but we don't usually use school as a place to learn that. But stuff like doing your assignments on time, being on time to class, cutting out excuses, not saying stuff like the dog ate my assignment or the printer was out of ink, not waiting until the last minute to do stuff. See, these are things that you're going to carry forward. And even more important than that, if you don't, look, I can remember the students, even though they were super gifted, talented, I can remember the ones that were on time, did what they said what they were going to do, gave lame excuses, and I can remember the ones that were professionals and handled their business, and I could always depend on. And guess who I'm probably not going to call for a gig? I'm just not going to take a chance on that, because as I'm trying to help other people, I still need to make sure that the product is still a quality product. But I mean, we can talk more specifically about some of that stuff at a later date. We've gone over time. I wanted to say thank you so much for everybody's attendance, and again, let's have a hand again for the talent. Let's get out there and say yes.
Round of applause for Sean Thunder Wallace.